Welcome, everybody. This is the second Fast Forward podcast in this particular series, and it's part of the Putting Ourselves in the Picture project. And I'd like to welcome Eileen Perrier, fantastic photographer who I've known for an awful long time. And like you guys in the audience, she also studied here for her BA, so that's pretty exciting. Eileen's a photographer I have admired enormously, right from when she was a student, and she's essentially predominantly a portrait photographer, although she has done some other things, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her career so far. And she currently has a big solo show at Autograph in London. Well done, Eileen. Congratulations on all your work. And thank you for being here with us.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honour to be here. And thank you so much for coming as well. Okay, so on the left-hand side is Armit Francis. And in the middle is a cover of a book that I found just before, when I was doing my A-levels, actually. I saw this book and the cover I just thought was really amazing. And basically it was in Goulburn Road. And I thought, I really want to meet this photographer. So this is before I did my degree. I did A-levels in sixth form college, and I started off doing physics, chemistry, biology, and then I dropped all of them because I realised I hadn't studied them well enough. I did double sciences, and I think you really needed to do triple science to actually be able to do those A-levels properly. So I dropped them all. So I took up sitting guilds in photography, and I fell in love with photography from that moment, I think, really. And anyway, I found this book in Goulburn Road around that time, and I thought, I really, really want to meet this photographer. I'd love to meet this person. And then just by chance, I was working in Camden, and it wasn't a Sunday when I was working there. However, I was there hanging out, and for some reason I went into the station, and there were these two Brazilian girls who were trying to get to somewhere. So this is in the 90s. So on a Sunday, trying to get to outside London past 5 o'clock was quite hard to do. And for some reason, I don't know why, I decided to help her, or help them rather, because the ticket guy wasn't being helpful to them. So then I thought, okay, let me see if anyone else can help me to give them directions as to where to go. And so I left the station, went outside, and there was a phone box on the right-hand side by the station. There were two black guys kind of tucked by the phone box. And I went up to them, I said, can you help me with these two girls in the station? And one of them came forwards, and then we were talking to the Brazilian girls, and then I said, what's your name? And he said, Armit. I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a photographer. I said, you're not Armit Francis? And he was like, yeah. I was like, no, you're Armit Francis. Oh my gosh, I wanted to meet you. And I picked him up and I swung him around. And then on that particular day, we went back to his studio because they couldn't get to wherever they were going because it was going to be closed. The station was closed, or the trains didn't go that far at that time. And so went to his studio. Don't know what happened to those two Brazilian girls, other than I know they stayed over at his studio. And then I used to go and visit him. So while I was doing my City and Guilds photography, I'd go and show him my work. And I remember the day when he said, this is a really great portrait. I'd photographed this young black woman it would have been, maybe it was Portobello. It could have been Camden. But in Portobello, it was a black and white photograph. And her gaze was looking down, and she had these kind of these twists, or braids rather. In Star Wars, Princess Leia? That kind of style, she had that. And he said they were really beautiful. And another thing he told me about was how to handle my print. So he'd say, hold it from the corners and lift it up. Don't just pick it up, otherwise you'll kink your print. So I remember that as well. And then he told me about Autograph as well. So he said, he advised me that he was one of the founders of Autograph. I didn't really think much about it after that. I just knew that he was part of Autograph. He was a photographer, really liked his work. And what I loved about his work was that with this particular book, it was to do with the Black Triangle. So he basically travelled to Africa, America. He's from Jamaica, but was based in London from the age of 8. He came to London from the age of 8. So he went to Jamaica as well. So that's America, UK, Jamaica and Africa. So he kind of crossed different continents. And that was really amazing to see with his work, because most of the photographers, or black photographers that I'd seen at this time, are mainly coming from America. So it was just really amazing seeing these portraits that he'd produced and then getting to know the actual person. And the funny thing is, the book where I found it on Goulburn Road, he actually lives just up the road from there. So it's quite funny. that I met him outside, like somewhere else, who really inspired me. So while I was at university, I also discovered writers such as Stuart Hall, Kabina Mercer, Paul Gilroy. And it was really exciting hearing a voice coming from a Black British perspective, along with key text and photographic works, which were well documented from artists in the States, as well as the UK. In the early 90s, 10/8 magazine had produced 3 key journals, which included interest in artists and writers. And this led me to discover Autograph as well as Armit. Then that's when I really kind of realised that Autograph was quite an important institution in some ways. And it's funny enough, I just went to see the show at Tate, which has got Anna's work in it, but also it focuses on quite a few artists who would have been shown through 10/8 magazine, and also shows the early stages of how Autograph came into being, as well as other, like the history of documentary photography with certain key practitioners, not all of them, but certain ones. You're in there, Anna. There were other influences that I had at that time as well in my early career, including like ID magazine, The Face magazine. I could relate to the fashion and age group that were being portrayed in the pages of these magazines. And it's funny, when I made my notes before, I hadn't actually worked for Face or ID magazine up until that point, up until about, 2 years ago or 2 years ago, I managed to get a commission. So it's quite funny that that's come about now. So I did this while I was in my final year of my degree show at Farnham's, and it became my degree show piece. So I went to Ghana in my 3rd year of studies, and I really felt like it was really important for me to do that trip. I was able to get the student loan. This was the first year when student loans came out. So I used the student loan money to pay for me and my mum to go to Ghana. My mum hadn't been for 30 years, and it was my first trip. I hadn't really travelled that much. And I always start with this picture because this photograph that I took in Ghana is in my mother's house, or my grandmother's house, the family house. And the man in the middle of the photograph, he came to the UK around the time of the Titanic, and he was a soldier in the First World War. He settled in the UK, got married, had 2 children, and Auntie Teresa's on the left-hand side, the brother's on the right. Anyway, they decided to go to Ghana in the 80s, I think it was 85, to find their Ghanaian side of their family. So her husband is also Ghanaian, half Ghanaian and half English. They come from the East End. When they were over in Ghana, Auntie Teresa found her side of the family, but Uncle Abraham didn't. Uncle Abraham was the one who was really eager to kind of find his roots, but he wasn't successful, but Auntie Teresa was. And it was through this photograph that she knew that this was her family home, because apparently they met someone in a restaurant, and that's how someone said that, oh, you look like someone from this family. Basically took them to the family house, and then she saw the photograph there. And while they were there as well, they were told to find my mum, who was living in the UK. And Uncle Abraham came with a small version of this photograph in 1987. And it was around the time when my sister had died. So it was quite a traumatic time for me and my mum. So strange to come round to the house and say they were a family, they were related to us, was, I don't think my mum would have allowed them to come in, but because I had a small version of this photograph, it meant that we became connected. And then there's all these weird little stories that go along the way. So my mum used to work in a bakery, and Auntie Teresa's daughter-in-law, so that's Auntie Teresa, her daughter-in-law's mother used to go to the bakery where my mum worked. And so one day she came in with the granddaughter, Essie, and my mum was like, Essie, what are you doing here? And she said, I'm with grandma, but the other grandma. So my mum had been serving someone from the family, for the years before, without knowing that she was related. So that's kind of weird and interesting. So I always love the backstory behind that photograph. The project that I did in Ghana was the first time that I shot in colour. So in my first year in Farnham, I was really terrified about using the colour darkroom, it still looks the same. I loved working there eventually, but it was, I'd been taking images in black and white up until that point, but I knew that trip to Ghana, I didn't want to have images that kind of were depicting Africa in a certain way. And at the time, a lot of the images were based on where there was wars taking place, which meant that there was famine happening in those places. So, yeah, and then there were the kind of how Africa was being portrayed at that time. The AIDS epidemic was quite a big thing at that time, and it was said that it came from Africa, which is not true, I don't believe. And also there was just a lot of negative connotations around Africa. And in my household, when family members used to talk about Ghana, it didn't sound like what I was seeing in the media, mainly through charities, sort of saying, give money to Africa, give money to certain groups of people. That's not what I was kind of getting from my family members. So I thought, I don't want to document in black and white. And it was also for me to kind of step out of my comfort zone through shooting in colour. So I made a big purpose to basically just take the images in colour. And I didn't know what to expect. Never been to Africa before, hadn't really travelled. I mean, I've been to France by that time through a school trip. I hadn't really travelled that much. So it was a big thing going to Ghana with my mum. My mum came to the UK when she was 19 with her first husband, who was a musician. She didn't really talk much about her family either, so I kind of knew about her family through the friends that she had. She was the only child of her father, who died when she was a baby. And then there was her mother, who'd had children again. She'd married again, so she'd had half brothers and sisters. Yeah, but she didn't really talk much about the family members. So it was kind of like I wasn't sure what to expect. So I just decided I was going to photograph everything when I went. So I photographed family members that we came across. I photographed the environments that we were staying in. A lady on the left, her name's Banner. She came to the airport in this dress, and it was late at night, and I thought she looked really beautiful. So a few days later I said, could you please put that dress back on, because I really thought she looked really powerful in it, and I loved how she took her stance by crossing her arms, just, holding the space. And then the gentleman on the right-hand side, that was in the countryside in the eastern region where my mum comes from. We were shown basically all these different areas where my mum had inherited land, and we came into this area, and it was really early in the morning, and he got up really early to farm, so by the time we got there around midday, he was resting. And I just loved the colours. When I took the portrait, I didn't realise how much detail was in the image. Yeah, I just think it's quite an amazing image, and that image got selected for the Taylor Wesson at the time as well. So one of the things I'd say is, whether you're in your first year, last year, or you've just graduated, submit your work while you're a student. Don't leave it until you think you've finished uni. Yeah, even in your first year, right? You can start submitting work. If your tutors go, that's a really good image, just start entering into competitions that don't cost you anything, okay? Love this image as well with the baby powder, because there's kind of like a reference to colonialism in a way. My mum used to cover me in this stuff, and I'm sure I've got asthma because of that. But I love how you got the white baby and then the palm trees in the background. Again, I love the colours as well. This is still in my final year of studies, right? So we went for 2 to 3 weeks in Ghana. And then when we came back, I just thought, oh my gosh, I just realised how important my mum's friends and family were. Or I say family, but when I say family, I mean that people who were my mum's friends, I would call them uncles and aunties, right? Or their children would be my cousins, even though we weren't blood relatives. So I knew that I wanted to document those family members. And I was in Farnham at the time, so I was thinking, how could I do that? Because they weren't going to come to Farnham to have their picture taken. So I decided to set up a studio in people's homes and document them. But at the time, when we were having our studies here and looking at documentary photography, which would have been Anna Fox's work, Martin Parr, David Moore, Tom Hunter, the type of images we were seeing in the family home were, people in the living rooms, sitting, you documented them as they were. And I wanted to kind of do something slightly different to that. So that's where I kind of got the backdrops to stage in the family home. I wanted to kind of create a studio environment. Ideally, I would have liked to have had the images like this where they're totally cropped. I wanted everything to be cropped so you wouldn't be able to see the background. But obviously the material was only so wide, so when it came to doing the group photographs, I had to have the environment in there. So yeah, I used 2 lights. I asked the tutors how could I set up the lighting because I wasn't that confident with lighting at that time. So I remember bursting into the staff room, I think, and asking maybe Dave Daggers how to do it. Because at that time we were only using the Mets flashes for stuff mainly, not the studio lights. And I think they told me just use 2 heads, either side, 90-degree angles, and I used the 6.7, the Mamiya 6.7, just in case you want to know technically what I used. It was interesting when I was doing these portraits because I set these backdrops up and I used red, gold and green to symbolise the Ghanaian flag, and people would get dressed up. So when you're at home, you've got your slippers on and you've got your jogging bottoms or your PJs that you wear at home, right? And then as soon as they saw the studio set up, they disappear and then dress up, go in their African attire or Western attire. And I was quite surprised. And they didn't just do that once, they do little changes because they were probably thinking, I'm going to rinse this out now, I'm going to get the most out of this free photo shoot. I remember at the time I was thinking about cropping the image of my mum and Auntie Gladys, which is on the right-hand side. And I remember, I think it was Anna, actually, who said, don't do that because Jesus in the corner and the wallpaper, that's what makes the image. It allows us to understand that this is part of a domestic space. And so I'm really glad that I didn't do that. I'm glad there was no Photoshop because I would have cleaned up all the creases. I would have got rid of, I would have cropped everything, and I would have retouched stuff. So I'm glad that there was no Photoshop, which meant that you see the images as they were. And the lady here, next to my mum in this image, that's Auntie Mary. So that's Auntie Teresa's daughter-in-law who had Essie, who came into the bakery, right? So she's Irish. I like how basically the portraits show not just the Ghanaian side of the family, but my godmother's Jamaican, and then you've got the Irish connection as well. So yeah. After I graduated, I was fortunate to get support from Anna. So Anna plays a very important role in my career. And I'm sorry I keep saying it, Anna, but it's the truth. So you were really supportive while I was a student, and then you were really supportive because you gave me my first exhibition with Val Williams. And then you also told me about autograph. So again, you reinstated the thing about autograph, which made me look into autograph even more. And so I went to show autograph my work when I graduated, and they gave me a commission a year later. And they were the first to produce a monograph of my work, which was quite amazing. So they commissioned me. It was the first time I'd got paid to do what I do, which was kind of unusual, So by this time, I took the portraits with a Mamiya twin lens. So I bought myself a new camera, a second-hand camera, and I used the Mamiya and I took the portraits in the family home. So by this time, you can see that the backdrop is part of the environment. I'm not trying to make it perfect. And I just love, again, how family members continue to kind of get dressed up. And while I was at uni again, Anna Fox comes in again. Anna told me about, say, the Kite's work. So I wasn't aware of any African studio portraiture at this time. I wasn't aware that there was a canon of African photography. And so I looked him up and I was really excited to just see that, wow, that, there's someone who's doing these really beautiful portraits. I then looked back at my mum's family album, and then I could see that actually I was aware of that, but I just didn't, I was taken for what was, available to me for granted. And I really love this image on the left-hand side. So I thought this was the same auntie, but it isn't. There's 2 different aunties, 2 different wigs, but they've got the same handbags. But what I love is that one's wearing the Ghanaian attire and the other auntie's wearing a Western dress. But it's in the same studio. And then on the right-hand side, that's the only image that my mum's got of her uncle who raised her as his daughter because her father died. And then her sister, her youngest sister, Amma, is the image on the far right. After I graduated from Farnham, I decided to work in a studio for a year because I still wasn't confident with lighting. So I was in a studio in King's Cross for a year where I kind of was not just trying to learn how to work in a studio and understand flash lighting, but also I wanted to make connections. I thought I was going to end up working, assisting photographers and then hopefully at some point become a freelance photographer. And that didn't kind of work out how I thought it would. And also in that time, I continued to develop a new project around hair, Afro hair and beauty. So this particular image is like the starting point. So when I was a kid, my mum used to use this particular pressing oil called Blue Magic. The actual contents is blue and it smells amazing. and it's meant to be used to straighten your hair. So you use a hot comb and you put this product on, and it's meant to help stop your hair from burning so you can straighten your hair. Another thing I used to have done, my mum used to do for me, was she used to wrap my hair with thread. And that was another way of also straightening the hair, but in a natural way, which is quite interesting. But I love that image because I like how, again, I was surrounded by certain things that is part of my heritage, which is my hair. And I love this quote by Chimamanda Adichie Ngozi around relaxing hair from her book Americana, which says, relaxing your hair is like being in a prison. You're caged in. Your hair rules you. You didn't go running with Kurt today because you don't want to sweat out this straightness. You're always battling to make your hair do what it wasn't meant to do. And I love that because this quote comes from her book years later from when I did my projects, but I like how there's artists and writers who continue to talk about the subject of hair, because sometimes I think, why do I have such interest in hair and fashion and beauty, or black beauty I should say specifically. So it's just nice knowing that artists continue to talk about that. What inspired me to actually develop the project that I did over a number of years was a chapter from Kabila Murta's book called Welcome to the Jungle, which was on black hair and style politics. I just felt like this resonated with me. So it says, human hair seems to be a neutral aspect of the body, yet hair is never a straightforward biological fact because it is almost always groomed, prepared, cut, concealed, or generally worked upon by human hands. Such practices socialise hair, making it the medium of significant statements about self and society and the codes of value that bind them or do not. In this way, hair is merely a raw material consistently processed by cultural practices which just invest it with meaning and value. So I wanted to kind of find a way in which I could document this. And I don't know how I found out about it, but basically there's like an event that happens called the Afro Hair and Beauty Show. It used to take place in Alexandra Palace. And so the first time I went, I didn't know what to expect. It's a bit like going to Olympia, to like the home show, which is like where there's loads of stands. People are kind of doing displays, demonstrating stuff. So for the hair show, people are having their hair done. There's fashion shows taking place. So I documented all of that, but then I decided to also photograph the people who went to the show as well. And the first year that I did, which is this one with the lips, the backdrop was part of a double-decker bus. The advert was for Dark and Lovely. And basically I just put the chair in front of the bus, the back of the bus, and I asked my friend to keep an eye on my equipment while I went round trying to find people to photograph. And the last person I photographed was the girl with the blue hair and the blue eyes and blue contact lenses. I was actually quite scared to photograph her because I thought she looked so amazing. I thought she's going to say no. There's no way she's going to say yes. But she said yes, and I was really excited about that. And then I continued to go to the hair show. It was like for 5 more years, and I'd go to different spaces in the Alexandra Palace. And then the last time that I went, it took place in the Business Design Centre in Angel. And it's funny, I took portraits there, but I just thought the projects ended. For some reason, I don't know if it was to do with the journey to Alexandra Palace on the bus, going up the hill. I don't know what it was. And then being in this space. It was kind of like this event that took place in that particular location. And then I was in a group show in Barcelona, and it had Joy Gregory's work in it. And she did a commission for this group show that I was in. And there was a quote. She took a picture of Alexandra Palace, and the quote she had was that there used to be a human zoo at Alexandra Palace, which included Nubians, which included Africans that had been, that were performing there. And I don't know why I'm sharing that here, but there's definitely kind of something quite historical about that place that has meaning that I wasn't aware of when I took these images, but there's like history in that space, which I didn't find with the Business Design Centre. But the hair show continues. It's going to be happening at the end of this month for the bank holiday that's happening this month. This Nigerian photographer called Ojikere, I really love his work. He did these pieces, or he did this project in the 70s, I believe. of African hairstyles, and he felt like it was really important to document these different hairstyles because he could see that they were disappearing, because a lot of the women were starting to wear their hair in a more Western style, straightening their hair. Now we're in the 21st century, and people are, wearing wigs more. I think some people are wearing their hair in more traditional styles, but they did die out for a while. So even myself, I've started to get my hair wrapped with thread again. And I'm kind of sad because I pay for it now, whereas before my aunties would do my hair before, or my mum would do my hair. I feel like it's important for me to kind of wear my hair naturally now, because I've gone through the phase of having the wigs, doing the braids, shaving my hair when I was at Farnham. That's what I did. I shaved all my hair off when I was in my 20s. I did all the different things. So yeah. And I feel like it's really important to document people who look like me, because at the time when I took these portraits, especially the first ones that I did in 1998, I wasn't seeing people in advertising. I wasn't seeing black women or men being advertised who were just everyday people being advertised. In a way, the only people I was seeing was musicians, or it'd be athletes. They were kind of like the people who were shown as icons, whereas now I feel like in terms of advertising, it's more diverse than it was. People say that it's, they still feel like it could go further. I think it's interesting because you just had the Met Gala, right? And everyone's dressed as a dandy. So that's quite interesting, quite powerful that that's happening at this point in time. So when you go to the exhibition, you'll see that there's going to be a wallpaper with all different hair products. So in 1999, 1998, 1999, I started to collect hair products, and this was the starting point of that. So it was my mum's hair product, but then I started to collect really kitsch looking hair products that had quite stereotype titles on them, what the name, basically it might be Black and Beautiful or Soft and Free. So I was deliberately collecting products that either were kind of suggesting positive messages, or they were saying positive messages, but then there'd be kind of like this dark undertone. So some of them might be bleaching creams to lighten your skin, or they'd be, for example, suggesting that you straighten your hair. So there might be there's one product called Beautiful Beginnings, and it's for kids to straighten their hair. And then there's another one that I think is quite funny called Gentlemen of Leisure. So it's just all these, it's basically to relax the head or to soften the hair, but also to put stencils in the hair as well. And that's, the kind of stencils that they used were quite funny, like thunderbolts or a basketball player or dice, so they're kind of like these stereotypes of what guys should kind of look up to, so to speak. Anyway, you'll see it when you go to the exhibition. So I took a year out, and I was working in the studio. I was taking my portfolio around to magazines, and people would go, yeah, your work's great. Yeah, we really love your work. But then they'd pass me on to someone else. And it was a bit like I wasn't getting any work, and I really needed to make money. And so while I was doing that, I was also going to openings, and I kept seeing Peter Kennard. So in the first year, Peter Kennard had left Farnham, and he'd gone to the Royal College. And at one point he'd say, why don't you come and study at the Royal College? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to write anymore. I've done my dissertation and that was enough. And years later I found out I had dyslexia. So that would explain why I was struggling with essay writing. But after having that year out and things not really going in any, not getting enough assistant work to be able to live on, not being able to shoot commercially, I thought, okay, why don't I just go down the fine art route, or at least continue with my studies? And that's when I did my MA. I managed to get into the Royal College. And at that time, there were only 15 students. It was a 2-year course. There was 15 students per year, which was amazing. Yeah, Olivier Richon had just started as the course leader. So yeah, it was an interesting time to be going to the Royal College, and I loved it. So I loved being there. I loved being in that place. It was amazing. And while I was there, we did an art college trip to Paris. I remember this station called Nation, and I loved it. I thought I'd love to go back and photograph at this station. And basically, at the end of the first year, there was an opportunity to do a residency. So you had to kind of write a proposal to go back to Paris. They had a studio in this place called Cité des Arts. And myself and another student, Anne Hardy, who's a very successful artist in her own right. We were able to go back for a month and hang out, drink wine, eat bread and cheese and just hang out, go to galleries, show people our work, and then also support each other with, taking pictures out and about. And so we managed to get permission to go onto the underground, it's basically the underground station, or the overground station, the RER, which is the equivalent of what we have here. And I was able to do my project to do these portraits. And while I was doing these portraits, my camera broke. So I lost quite a lot of images. And also I was photographing. I don't know why I was doing it, but I was shooting with both eyes. So I'd use both my eyes to take pictures. And then whenever I used my right eye, everything would come out soft. So all those images I couldn't really use any of those because they were too soft. So I've learned just to use my left eye rather than my right. And I did these, so I was able to edit the images down and I produced these portraits. And these are just a sample. There's again, you'll see at the exhibition, there's 9 and there's 7 in the show, and then you'll see the actual station itself. And at the time I had French lessons, so I asked my French teacher to write down, please can I take your portrait in French? Which I'd read to the person as I was going along the platform. And I just used a tripod and I used my twin lens camera that I'd got from my commission that broke. So I did this project in my first year at the Royal College, and then in my final year, I did this series called Grace, and it's people with a diastema, a gap in their front teeth, like myself. So I'm in this series, and I photographed about 20 people. I did a plug on the radio. So that was Radio London. So the DJ was called Andrea Oliver, who you'll know as Andy. She's like the chef. Do you know the TV chef? So she was basically my partner at the time. He used to go to a gym in Ladbroke Grove. And he basically said, Andrea Oliver, she's got a gap. Why don't you ask her if she'll have her portrait taken and do a plug on the radio? I was just like, no, I don't think she'll do that. But I just, I called up the radio station. They said, oh, you need to send in a proposal. So how in uni you have to write a proposal and an evaluation. You think, what the hell, why do we have to do that all the time? Just do it, because it comes in useful for putting your ideas down. And in this case, I had to give that to the producer. And through that, it got sent to Andrea Oliver, and then she agreed to plug it on the radio. And then she also came and had her portrait taken, which was really amazing. I did try to get Madonna, and she said no. And I think I tried Jimmy Tarbuck as well, and he said no. So I did try to get some famous people, but it didn't work out. So I managed to get, like I said, around 20 odd people. Some were friends, some were people that were from uni that I'd seen around. There was one technician called, I think, Bill, who I photographed. And then the lady on the right, that was a friend of a friend who told me about Nicola. And then my mum came to have her portrait taken as well. It was the last photograph that I took of my mum, because I did the portraits in February and my mum passed away in April. So the title of this piece is named after my mum. And in terms of this project as well, for the students, for the first years in the room, I did a test before I actually did the final shoot. So through working in the studio for the year, I was able to see how photographers did their work. And there was one particular photographer called Sandro Serrano, I think his name was. He was just an amazing photographer. He did fashion, he did still life, he did advertising. And I remember one time he used these Kinoflow lights, and I thought, that's what I want to use for this project. I did a test with the lights. They were quite expensive. And then I tried to replicate it with a softbox, like a Rector, but it didn't have the same effect in the eyes. And so I was able to, in the end, I hired out the Kinoflows, which are like strip lights. Yeah. I was able to get a discount because I knew the guys from doing the studio work. Through doing the test as well, the actual backdrop is lilac, but because the Kinoflow light drops off so quickly, it makes the backdrop blue. So that's how I decided that, okay, that's interesting. So I'm going to get everyone to wear like a blue top, because I was trying to play on the school photograph and being self-conscious as a child. So I remember being picked on, not in primary school, but in secondary school. I remember Tony Jackson saying, I bet you can get £1 coin in your gap. And I was just like, what's he talking about? And then when I went home, I tried it and I was like, I can fit a £1 coin at Tony Jackson's. I can't believe I can fit a coin in my gap. For me, it was about identity, but through that everyone can relate to in a way. So mine was the gap. It could be having ginger hair, it could be having sticky out ears, it could be having glasses. You know, someone always picks on you about something when you're a teenager, right? So my thing was the gap. And I was kind of, as well, I think at that point, because a lot of my work that I guess I was getting recognised for was to do with, you know, my identity of being a black woman, hair, Afro hair. And I was kind of moving away from just that, you know? So that the Gap Tooth project or the Grace series was me kind of looking at identity in a different way. But with this project, when I was going to the Royal College at the time, I'd get off at Notting Hill Gate Station. I thought I'd really love my work to be shown up the escalators. This was a time when advertisement was on cardboard. And I thought, how can I get my work on these adverts? I want the general public to see it. I mean, I love my work to be in galleries, but I also want people who don't come into galleries to also see my work somehow. And so I asked the guys at the ticket station, you know, how can I get my work shown up the escalators? And they were like, oh, no, you can't do that. You'd have to pay because it's advertisement. But for some reason, they knew about Platform for Arts. I don't know why they knew, or maybe the staff were informed to tell people. So I got in touch with Platform for Arts. And then 2 years later, they were able to show my work at Piccadilly Circus, which was amazing. And what was really, really great was that the work was shown at Piccadilly Circus at Subway 2, so as you come out the station. But the poster that was used to advertise this show was all over London, on all the underground stages of my mum. So I was able to see my mum everywhere. So it was just really, really nice. It was like really, really special. And so basically, how do I make my money from now? Because like, you can see that I've done my degree and then I've done my MA, and it's just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive? Because like, I want to be able to, you know, do photography, right? So one of the things I did was I was able to work at Autograph as an administrator. I did that. I'd work there 1 day a week. That was something that I did, but that wasn't going to pay the bills. I was still working in retail at that time. And then while I was at the Royal College, I started to do artist talks. And so and through doing the artist talks, that's when I started to get work, like lecturing work. First, it was just a visiting lecturing role, and then I was able to get a position at University of Westminster, and I was there for 18 years. And then I was always there part-time because I'd always do like a photography commission. So I was also started to get commissions, but they were art commissions. So just going to show you some of the commissions. So now I'm going to go fairly quickly. So in 2004, I was able to get this commission with Gasworks. And how this commission came about was really weird. So like in 2002, when I had my son, I saw in Art Monthly, it was Art Monthly, there was an advert for Space Studios to do a residency. And I don't know why I applied, because I just had my son, right? So it was a bit crazy to apply. But I applied, I came with my son in the car carrier, and they gave me a free studio for a year. And that was in Hackney. And it was the other side of town. The whole thing was a bit kind of like, it was a bit of a funny thing to do, but it was really amazing. So I had my own space. I was able to work, and it wasn't too funny because my partner's family were actually from Hackney, so it was okay actually doing that when I think about it. It wasn't totally bonkers. But through that, one of the people who did the judging for that residency, she worked at the Gasworks, and so that's how this commission came about. Another commission I got a year later was with Focal Point Gallery, which is in Southend. And basically, I think this came through Autograph, but basically I was asked to do anything I wanted in Southend and for Focal Point Gallery. And at that time, Focal Point Gallery was mainly focused on photography. That's all they did. It's changed quite a lot now. But I did it, I was told to do this commission. I remember going to Southend and I had my son in a backpack, and it was really cold, and it was what I just thought, I don't want to be outside. Whatever I do, I don't want to be outside. So I decided to do a series of portraits of people in the hair salons in Southend. And it was different to what I was used to. So I was seeing women with getting their hair bleached. They'd use the foil, and I thought that looks really cool, because I don't know, I just thought that looks really interesting. I want to document that. And then I found 3 hair salons that I photographed in it. And in one of them, there was a black lady who came in on a Saturday to do Afro hair. So I documented that as well. Another commission I did was Culture and Care. And this was with the Florence Nightingale School of Nursing and Midwifery in Waterloo. So I did a series of portraits of staff and students who were from the midwifery school. The reason why they had an artist do a commission was because they felt like they were not visible within the medical school because the doctors kind of got all the accolades. So they wanted to have like a project that kind of documented their team. So that was a really interesting project. And I was resident for 2 weeks in this office, and it was really weird. It was a really odd shape. So I had to kind of have a makeshift studio. I had this sash made, a blue sash made, which I got the inspiration from Queen Victoria. So I wanted to kind of make the staff and students feel like they were royalty somehow, like they were important. So that's why I had the blue stash, but at the same time also playing on Carry On as well. I don't know if you know the Carry On films, but like Matron and all that kind of stuff that kind of play on like that, but at the same time not use like a red sash or a pink sash, which would be more comical, if you see what I mean. But there was that in my mind as well. Another commission I did was for the Whitechapel Gallery, and how that came about was the Grace series was shown at the Hayward Gallery as part of a group show called Africa Remix. And that came about through the commission that I did with Autograph and the first monograph that I had made, which was, they kind of shipped it out to many different institutions. And there was a curator called Simon Njami who loved that work. And I actually got the award in Mali, the Seydou Keita Award, back in 2001. So he was a great advocate of my work, and I was part of that group show. So the Whitechapel saw that project at the Hayward Gallery, and so that's how this commission came about. And they said that you could do a project around Wentworth Street, so that basically the Whitechapel was closed for a year, and they were commissioning artists to do different projects. And at the time, I picked up this book by Matthew Brady, and I really wanted to do a project on what I was seeing in these images. So I was doing research on that. I was like, what is that? And then basically it was called a retort stand. And in Victorian times, when people had their portraits taken, they'd either do them outside and they'd have a clamp on their head to keep them still because there was no flash, or they'd be in like a studio with the northern light. So you can see here, so they'd get the light, but they'd also still have that retort stand holding them up. Or sometimes with Matthew Brady, they'd have like an armrest. So you can see in this, maybe not, yeah, in that image, you can see there's like a curtain in the right-hand side image. So they'd be resting their arm on something to try and hold them still. So I thought that I wanted to recreate that myself somehow. And just by chance, I was trying to use like clamps that you have for beakers, but they weren't wide enough. And then I mentioned to the technician at Westminster that I was doing this project, and he says, I think I've got a head clamp. And I was like, how does he have that? But anyway, managed to get this head clamp, and then I was able to use a stand and a super clamp that I'd picked up about through working in the studio to make this retort stand, my makeshift retort stand. And then I did these portraits on this market stall, and I had a really low budget, so I either had to shoot digitally or I couldn't shoot with film because there just wasn't enough money in the budget. So I didn't want to shoot digitally at the time, so what we agreed is that I would do it with Polaroid instant film. And at the time, when I was getting Polaroid, the only Polaroid that was left was black and white because they were discontinuing Polaroid. So I was able to get maybe the last few boxes at that time, and I documented everyone with the Polaroid. So it was black and white Polaroid 5x4. I used a field camera. You can see the head clamp there. And I took people's portraits on the market. It's a really interesting area on Petticoat Lane. So you've got the Bangladeshi community, but you've also got the city slickers from Liverpool Street. You've got artists who are around there. You've got the market traders as well. So all different people came and had their portraits taken. And then the other place where I took portraits as well was Denning Point, which was this tower block. And in that tower block, I set up a white tent by the foyer area, by the lifts. And that particular block of flats is really interesting because I think a few years before that, there was an artist in residence who was in the lift, and he just documented the residents coming in and out of the lift, and he'd ask them questions, and then they would kind of divulge stuff to him over time after they basically grew to trust him in a way. And the film's called The Lift. So if you want to find that, it's a really nice art piece. So I did these portraits, and then through having the work displayed at the Whitechapel when it reopened, I shook Prince William's hand. So he came to open the Whitechapel. And I'm not really into the royal family. I thought, oh, what's the big deal? But then when he came, my palms started sweating. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet Prince William. And I shook his hand. I was a bit like, oh my gosh. And now he's going to be king at some point, isn't he? So it's a bit funny. But anyway, at the so the work was shown at the Whitechapel, and then the curator from Germany saw the work, and I got commissioned to do the portraits again in Germany. And basically, each time I did the portraits, I would do them with the 5.4 Polaroid. I think by this, I still was using Polaroid at this time, but I'd scan the Polaroids, and then I'd give a copy to the sitters. And on the back, I'd make a stamp. So each studio, portable studio that I did, it would be named after that location, so the market. So the Whitechapel series was called Wentworth Street Studio, and then this one is called Schillermart Studio. And then I did it for Tate Britain, and I did it for Autograph, and then I also got a residency, a free studio again near to where I lived, and I did it where I live as well, in Queen's Park. But by that time there was no Fuji instant film, so I basically shot it on transparency, 5.4 transparency, and then I did the project again for Peckham platform, and I shot that on film. I've also done residency, so that's another way that I've been able to have an income from residencies and also have space to produce work. So again, Autograph and Lightwork allowed me to have a residency at Lightwork in Syracuse in upstate New York, and that was really interesting. And I did a series of portraits of the Freedom Trail. So it's basically where slaves would hide out trying to get to Canada for their freedom. So I just did it on foot, and I just found the different locations, which I found through the museum, the local museum. And I'd meet people along the way, and then people would say, what are you doing with your camera? And then I'd explain what I was doing, and then I'd take their portrait, as well as taking locations, the actual locations as well. And I was still obsessed by that headrest. That's why you can see it in this picture. So again, another thing that I was commissioned or paid for was it started off with me just using my mobile phone. So I wasn't really into digital photography for a long time. I'd do it for like a few commercial jobs, and I'd get very, very few commercial jobs. But there was something about having my phone and seeing people and thinking, oh, that looks really interesting, and wanted to document people. And then I started using my phone because like I wouldn't have my camera with me all the time, right? So this image on the left, this one was at Queen's Park where I live, and basically I saw this family on the bench hanging out, and I just thought, oh, they look really, really... So it was just a nice moment, and I wanted to document it, so I just asked for their permission to take their picture. So I did it with my phone, and I think I sent it to them, but I just loved how they were just doing what they were doing, and I love how the kids looking at me and the grandmothers looking at me. And then I decided just to continue taking portraits of people with my phone. So I'd ask their permission, and I'd say, just keep doing what you're doing. And then for some reason, I don't know why, but I got paid to take pictures on my phone. And the first commission I got was with Tate. So basically they had this family weekend, and I thought they were asking artists to do projects for that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to run a photography workshop with another friend of mine who I work with quite a bit in schools. Mainly we do workshops in schools. And then they were like, no, we just want you to use your phone to document your journey from your house to the gallery, and then document people in the gallery space. So that's what I did. Yeah, it was quite a nice thing. And then the work was displayed on Combi TV. So I went to people's houses to buy these Combi TVs secondhand. And basically the images would then, as I was photographing things on the hour, by the hour, we would then add more images to the CDs, and then they were put onto the Combi TVs around the gallery space. I had 4 Combi TVs, DVDs. So there was that. I got commissioned again. After I did the commission with Peckham Platform, someone recommended me from there to work with the Bush Theatre, and I did a series of portraits of people on the Uxbridge Road, which is meant to be the most diverse street in London, or even in Europe maybe. So yes, I did a series of portraits of people along the Uxbridge Road with my mobile phone, And then I also got Tate again to commission me again. Well, they came back to me again and they asked me to do moving still images. So this time I did 10-second stills of people. I couldn't take 10-second stills because people would think I was taking their picture, but I was actually doing a video of them. And then they were stitched together throughout the day or over the weekend. And then, they were shown on wall displays around Tate Britain for the family weekend in 2017. And then just coming up to the present, I recently was part of this exhibition called The Missing Thread, which was about Black British fashion. And it was interesting being part of this exhibition. This image was selected and then it was used as one of the images to promote the show. Yeah, it's funny being included in something that I was not a part of, and I think the whole exhibition was about that, about artists, filmmakers, fashion designers making their mark in ways that they had to find their way in the industries that they are part of. So it was interesting being in this exhibition for that and being part of a story of fashion, even though I'd say that my work I guess does touch on that, but I've never been shown in a fashion magazine really, do you know what I mean? So it was kind of interesting being part of that. And then through that, being in that exhibition, that led to me getting commissioned with the Face magazine. And I remember when they offered me the commission, I was thinking, I'm too old. Do you know what I mean? It would have been fine like when I was in my 20s, but now, But it was really, really great to do the commission. It was about teenage girls, and originally it came from this girl guide. It was like a girl guide survey, about the girls in the north not feeling as happy as the girls in the south. That was what it was. I don't know if that's true or not. And then they changed it just to look at girls in the south. And then they did the casting, they had a stylist. And so I just took the portraits, but the girls were interviewed. So they were people who were scouted, and I know that this particular model, they are used a lot. I've seen her a lot in magazines. Again, the location that they found was a youth centre, or a community centre rather. So I went there before the shoot just to kind of check it out. So again, it was like, I took some images on my phone, thought I'll be photographing in this space, but I wanted to know what was around that I could maybe use. And then that really was helpful because it meant that when we did the shoot, I had to photograph the girls in 4 different locations. So it was like, I brought that curtain along, that pink curtain, and there was a green curtain because there was a stage. And then we went outside, and then with each girl, I thought, okay, I think she'd work well against that backdrop that I'd photographed, like the city in the background, because the area we were in, it was very residential, and it felt like it was in a time capsule compared to the skyscrapers of Canary Wharf. So I kind of like that juxtaposition of like the old and the new in the images. I gave them the images that I was happy with, so I edited it down, but the picture editor selected the images, and the images they chose, I don't know if I would have done the series in that way, but it was interesting having someone else take the lead on that. And that's what usually happens anyway. It's the same with the exhibition. I've got the work, the curator came to my house, looked at what I had, and then made a decision as to what's going to go into the show, if you see what I mean. So there's a point where you don't have any say anymore, so to speak. And it was really interesting with this project because, again, the budget was quite tight. And so they wanted me to shoot on film, and I was just like, that's not going to cover. So I had to negotiate getting more money because I thought they wanted it digitally, but they said, no, we wanted it to be like the image you took of the girl with the blue hair. So they were very specific that they wanted it to be like that, which was quite interesting. These are just other commissions that I've done over the years. So this was like a commission I did for the Photographers Gallery, and this was part of the Olympic Games. They asked one photographer to do a portrait of one of the countries that were part of the Olympic Games. I did Ghana, and I photographed my old science teacher, Mr. Bakari. And this was the commission I did for Peckham Platform. So that's in the gallery space. And because I did it on 5/4, we were able to print up to like B0. So they were able to paste some of the images outside on the building, on the outside. And then this was the images I took of sitters in Queen's Park. And I really wanted to have this billboard. So I waited for ages. So I managed to get that billboard for free. So I basically just looked up who the billboard company was, and then I got in touch with them and I said, is it possible to show my work? It's a community project. And they said yes, but I had to pay for the blue back posters. And then basically I managed to get that paid for through work. So I was working at University of Westminster at the time. And then that project was there, and it was opposite where the studios were. They knocked that studios down. It was called the Albert. It was a meanwhile space. So I was really, really happy that I was able to do that. So it's all possible. It seems a bit like, how do these things happen? But I was always really nervous and thought, oh, that's a silly idea. But you can think it's a silly idea, but follow through is my suggestion. And people you want to get in touch with, just get in touch with them. The worst that anyone can say to you is no, or just blank you. Do you know what I mean? So that's the worst that anyone will say to you. And most times people say yes, so it's always worth doing stuff. This commission is really special because I was signed off work for a year. And while I was signed off work, the Foundling Museum asked me to do this portrait, it was a portrait of one of the foundlings. And basically, I wasn't well enough to do it, and it was a bit frustrating because the sitter lived I was like a 15-minute drive away. But I just knew that I wasn't well enough, and I knew that it wasn't going to just be about taking a portrait. There was going to be press involved. It was going to be, there's always more to it than meets the eye. So I said no to it, and then a year later, they came back to me and asked me to do the portrait, and this time it was a double portrait. And how it came about was that Pamela, who's on the right, her son wanted her to be part of the series. And basically, after she left the Foundling, she worked for I think it was for Guinness. And then her partner at the time was a soldier, and his friend fancied her because he saw a photograph of her and he nabbed her, basically. He was American. And she went back to America with him and married and lived in America, had 2 sons. But her and Nibs, when they were foundlings together, they had their beds next to each other and they used to hold hands in bed. And there's an interview of them that they recorded. And so I felt really honoured to photograph both of them. And it's the first double portrait that they have of the foundlings. So it was really special to have that. So kind of a full circle with Armit Francis. So Armit's now 80, and basically a couple of years ago I was applying for funding, and that's thanks to Natasha Caruana. I'm going to do a little big shout for her because I did her workshop on funding. So up until then, I always got my work through institutions, so I never applied for funding. But after I did the workshop with Natasha, I decided to apply for stuff, and I actually applied for this funding for myself and Armit with Art 360, who support artists with getting their work archived. The artist gets a grant of £10,000, and an archivist basically, gets paid to work with the artists on their archive. I didn't get it, but Armit got it. So there's an archivist working with Armit at the moment with his archive. So I would not have done that application if I hadn't have done that workshop. Through that, I'm realising more and more to think about, where does my work go after I die? I know that sounds a bit morbid, but legacy, like what happens next? So through doing the application with Art 360, and also now that my work is also starting to be I get commissions that are through institutions, so I'm seeing how important it is to have work in collections. So I'm thinking about that more, and I've got a couple of portraits in the Tate Britain collection, and how that came about was they bought the work through Autograph. The person who bought the work, the collector, they bought the work and they wanted it signed on the back. So, because I don't usually sign my works, and I was just like, I'll give you a letter of authenticity. And they were like, no, we want you to sign. And so how they got me to sign the back of my work is they bought 2 copies of the work. And then with the second copy, they donated it to Tate. So that's how the work got into Tate, which is quite interesting. So I'll leave it there. And this is the last image. So this is the final of my work in the exhibition that hopefully some of you will see. And whoever's listening to this might see it. It's on until September. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Yeah, that was fantastic. And I'm really interested about the title of the show, actually. It's a very nice, sort of elegant title, 1,000 Small Stories. And this idea of storytelling is embedded in it, which is, I don't know, for ages I've found it difficult to think of myself as a documentary photographer, though obviously I am. And I love the idea of storytelling much more in a way than the idea of documentary. That was really nice to see that as part of the title, but also this word small. And when we've seen your images and heard you talking today, I think one of the things that's dawned on me is how many images you've actually got. You've actually got a massive archive, haven't you? A massive archive.
Yeah, it's a bit scary.
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming the idea of small was connected to the idea of this everyday, the everyday and the ordinary. Is that?
I think so. Bindi.
It's her title.
It's her title.
Uh-huh.
Because I was a bit like, why is it called that?
Okay.
Originally.
Yeah.
And I was thinking maybe it's called that because I'm always, when you see my work, I don't usually, like it's quite formal in a way. Yeah. But when I share my work, as I've done today, I usually say all of the backstories. And I don't know if that's where it came from.
Oh, interesting.
Or if it comes from the fact that, each portrait is a story, right? And people have their own stories behind the image, so to speak, as well.
Yeah. No, interesting. Very
But
interesting.
I like your take of how you made the interpretation of 1,000 Small Stories.
Yeah, and that's always great, isn't it? With a show, you can make your own interpretation. But I was thinking very much about how you've been recording ordinary life through your portraiture.
Yeah.
And I wondered, really almost everything you've shown us is portraiture. I think there's a little bit in Ghana and a little bit in Syracuse that goes outside of that.
Yeah.
And that's partly just to expand the narrative, I think. But what made you get into portraiture in the first place? Why was portraiture the thing?
I think I like people. I find people fascinating. It's kind of weird because I realise I'm quite shy. And I noticed that in terms of close relationships, I usually like being with people one-to-one. It's really weird. Whereas but at the same time, I'm kind of fascinated by people as well. Like if I see someone, sometimes I just get this pull or this, I don't know how to explain it. Like I'll see someone, I'll be like, I want to capture that thing, whatever it is, at that moment. So I'll just ask them. It's like that thing of going up to those two, why did I go up to those two Brazilian girls in the station? It doesn't make sense. But I'm a bit like that. If I see someone needs help, I'll approach them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm a bit like that. But at the same time, and the camera as well, the camera allows me to have access to people in a way that I wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I was about to say that. So actually being a photographer and having the camera is a great, if you like, help towards actually being able to go and talk.
Yeah.
Approach
but don't
people.
get me wrong, I can be on the bus and start a conversation with someone. Like we can talk about anything. Like even today, on the way today at Waterloo, just sat down, there was a lady with her Labrador dog and we just started chatting, and it was quite, we just started talking about stuff, very general, but it was kind of, I like those little snippets that you get from people, those little moments that you have with people as well, which is quite interesting.
So today also, you talked about this a bit earlier, you expanded on this idea of a backstory to everything. And that's very nice for an audience sitting and listening to you talk about your work, to hear these personal stories that are embedded, like family stories as well, very personal family stories that are embedded in the fabric of the work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose the only way to ever get those is through a talk.
Because I find that I wouldn't necessarily share that with the work. Like, say, for example, the family portraits, you don't have the names of the people. Like, I don't think it's necessary for you to know their names. I know some artists do put first names of people, but for me, I don't think it is necessary. I don't know why, but that's just me.
Yeah, I feel the same, actually, a lot of the time. Yeah, maybe not always, but most of the time, And also, again, that very personal detail in the photographs, in the Red, Gold, Green series. You mentioned me liking the Jesus picture, and I actually remember that very vividly, thinking, wow, these little bits of background, they're so telling, aren't they?
Yeah.
So much about life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's thanks to you having the experience, the eye, whatever you have as a tutor, and also just, just being a master of photography, basically, to know that. Do you know what I mean? So me being a tutor as well, now, I'll see things in students' work that I couldn't say why it pulls me in some ways, but I can say, look, that's a great image, or make sure you do X, Y, and Z with that, because you can just see the potential. Do you see what I mean? And if you hadn't have said that, maybe I wouldn't have, I would have taken the work in a totally different direction.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. The whole education system in photography is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's great you've become a teacher yourself as well.
Yeah, it's amazing, yeah.
It's a nice balance between making work and working in education, I think.
Yeah.
So also, I mean, you've been very generous. I think something that's very, very important as an inspiration to up-and-coming photographers, to talk about, how you make a living and how one thing leads to another, or the connections. But one thing I was thinking about that's really, really hard, I think, especially for people who are leaving or a university or something, is this idea of where you get the motivation from. And is motivation sustainable, or does it go up and down? What happens with it? I think people possibly don't like to talk about it because it's not always there, is it?
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think it's quite hard. I mean, I feel like I'm quite a loner. Like, I am a bit of a loner, so I don't mind my own company. I don't mind doing a lot of stuff on my own. However, when I think about things as well, like when I think about uni, like being here, being at the Royal College, the people who I studied with, they were my network. They're the ones who helped me in some respects, like whether it was the tutor, but also the people you're sitting next to, that's your network. So not everyone's going to become a photographer, but they might become a picture editor, or they might work in a different capacity within the visual arts. And that's one way of being helped. And then there's the tutors who then become your colleagues all of a sudden. It's kind of weird. It shifts, And then you meet external people as well within the industry, but only if you decide to kind of like put yourself out there. And that's quite hard. How do you do that? But I think it works well when it can just be one or two friends that you have who you started with and you kind of grow together. It really helps, working as a collective. I think there's strength in numbers. And then, like for myself, I was really lucky because I managed to get work at Autographs. I was working there 1 day a week, and that really, really helped me because, again, maybe things would have been different for me, but because I was there, I could see how they supported artists. So it was like this relationship, which is kind of like back and forth, like they're not working with people constantly, but, they maybe do a publication with them, after a couple of years or 3 years, or there'd be an exhibition, they take on a new artist, and it'd be a relationship that goes on. And I'm part of that, the fact that I'm having this show with them, I think that's quite interesting. And it's the same with I know people who graduated who, again, they support each other. They have their little networks. They have dark rooms that they use together. They have studios. I think that's why, again, sorry to mention Natasha, but that work show Grow business that she's got is really important because people do lose that network that you have, that support system. And it's hard to keep going, I think, when you leave. Because, you've got relationships, there's family, you have to make money, you have to earn money. It's not easy.
So it's that idea of having a community being very, very important. Even if you are a loner, you need a community. And actually, Autograph's quite a unique organisation, isn't it? Because it's like part gallery, part agency, part publisher as well. It does all these things. There's all these things merged into one that you actually I don't know that you find it anywhere else. So it's quite a unique organisation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, other people might have a commercial gallery representing them, or...
And even then it's hard, because I think it's important that people who've also been represented. It helps, because if you know someone who's gone through that system, they can give you some suggestions. There's stuff written in magazines, art magazines, there's podcasts, there's quite a lot of material now that is shared, which is great, but there's nothing like someone who's a bit further ahead giving you some suggestions or some advice.
Yeah, and there's commercial agencies as well.
Agencies, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the pieces of work I realised I didn't know quite enough about, even though you made it when you were at the RCA. The Paris Metro Nation station, or Nation station.
Nation, yeah.
Why did you choose that station?
Because of the title, because of what it was called.
Nation.
Nation.
Ah.
And I thought that's interesting. And it was beautiful. It was just that it was really lush seats. The lighting was great, but it's quite diverse in Paris.
Yeah.
And I just thought, it's interesting, that space where people are, that transient space where people are moving back and forth through wherever they're coming from or going to. There was different people who were just in that space, who were waiting for a few minutes. They weren't going anywhere, And I just thought that the title fitted what I was seeing.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
And what you were interested in.
Yeah.
And I mean, this idea you've talked about identity, but not maybe dealing with identity, but not in a predictable way necessarily. Identity and portraiture, are they very important for you in the way they connect?
Yeah, and I think that's what's been interesting in terms of the commissions that I've received. I don't know why people have asked me to do certain commissions, but obviously they've seen something in my work and they feel like maybe I'm a fit for doing a certain type of commission. But I love how they've allowed me to meet people that I would never meet certain people. I would never be in certain institutions. Why would I? But I know it sounds, maybe cliched or a bit of, but being a black woman entering a certain space and being able to take someone's portrait, it's really interesting. I remember when I went to do the portraits, it was for King's College, the law school, and the different classrooms, and then there was a library. It was like Harry Potter. Their library was like Harry Potter, like out of a Harry Potter, movie. I was like, wow. Unless I'd studied law, there was no way that I'd have access to that place. All the people, they just wouldn't be.
Yeah. And thinking about that as a black woman photographer, do you have any feelings or comments on how that's been? The positives and negatives.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky with how far I've got in this industry. The fact that I've been able to have a living, through doing photography, but also being a lecturer. I think that's kind of quite unusual. But at the same time, say like that Missing Thread exhibition, that was almost a reminder of realising that, there were certain parts of the industry that I didn't have access to or I wasn't a part of because I didn't fit. And I went to see the Face magazine exhibition the other day. I was thinking, it would have been really nice to have, shot for the Face. But when I actually went to the exhibition, I just thought, this isn't actually me. Like the kind of work that was being documented at that time, it was a certain type of person who is part of a group. It came from the ground up. So it wasn't that, it's just that I wasn't part of that group. So of course I wasn't going to be in there, if you see what I mean. Because I wasn't doing the things that these people were doing. I wasn't clubbing, I wasn't out and about. But I was busy, I was just then at uni, or I was just studying, I was just doing my work.
But when you see something like, do you think to yourself, no, this isn't my world, or do you think, I want to get into this and make this my world? And
not now.
No.
I think at the time when with the mag, when you saw the magazine, I'm thinking, I'd love to do this, or I could do this. But now when I look back, I just realised, no, I wasn't part of that. I wasn't doing those things. So even though I thought that I would have loved to have been a photographer for that, Also, just going back to another thing, the thing about the archive, I was really struck just now because I hadn't realised how many images there are particularly in the Wentworth Studios and the Schillerstrasse Market. Yeah.
And perhaps there was one more like that, but there are massive images, aren't there?
Yeah. And the same with the Afro hair. So you only see like 12, but I've got hundreds.
So what could you do with that? What are you thinking?
That's what I need to figure out. I need to figure out, where can this stuff go, or does the stuff go anywhere? Because does the stuff go anywhere, or maybe it's just the negatives have to go somewhere. That's what I'm kind of realising now, because where does it go? Where does all of this stuff go that we all make? That's all of us,
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking because it's something I've been asking myself, and several of my peer group have been asking ourselves.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Where's this stuff going to go?
I don't know.
No, I know.
It's almost like, again, it's to do with networks, because it's to do with having someone to support you. So it's a bit like with Ahmet. Again, I don't know if I should be saying this here, but it's that thing of like, because of that relationship we've had, because I was signed off work for a year, I was seeing Ahmet more. And through seeing him, and just by chance, I did the workshop, that Work Show Grow, a couple of years before that, I think it was. It's almost like, yeah, so now, like he's in a position where some of his stuff will hopefully go to Autograph.
So you helped him to get that?
Just to get the funding.
To get the funding.
And then I've seen the process of like the archivist working with him, which has been really interesting.
Yeah.
But £10,000 doesn't go very far. So it's only like literally just covered having an inventory of his negatives. That's it. Not the print.
Is the archivist paid separately, or has that come out of the 10,000?
That's come out of the 10,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it doesn't go very far, does it? Wow. I mean, if you were going to, I was just thinking about advice for people who are going to be graduating, some soon, some later. And one of the things you said was talked about was having advocates. And I thought that was quite interesting. So, it doesn't just mean being a great photographer, but you also have to be a friendly, generous person as well. Do you think that's how you get advocates?
I don't know if it's being a woman, you have to be like that. I don't know if men are like that. I don't know, maybe they are.
We haven't got any men in the audience. That's bizarre.
That sums it up.
Interesting. What bit of advice what do you think is the main, well, there's lots of bits of advice, but one thing you think is very important?
I think you need to be true to yourself. That's what I think. And I think you need to get paid for what you do. That's another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard sometimes, isn't it? There's lots of people who want photographs for nothing. Now, I want to open it up for anyone who has a question. I know that might take a bit of time because we've been talking boldly for some time. But does anyone have a question?
What would you say to your younger self now that like you are where you are? What is something that you would say to young Eileen who is just getting out there into the world?
I would say you're all right. That's it. Don't change anything. It's fine. Yeah, that's what I would say. Because it's been all right. Even when there's been times when I've doubted myself or doubted, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? It's been all right. I know that sounds really weird. Yeah. And then I also feel like, the one thing I would say to my younger self and to all of you guys as well, keep doing your own work. Always do your personal work, because that's the work that will get you the work, the paid work or the commercial work, maybe. It's your ideas. If you've got ideas, that's your gift. It's your ideas, that's your gift. That's what will keep you going. And even if you think something's really silly, like you've got a silly idea, like a little spark, follow that spark, because you don't know where it will lead to, And that's what I've learned. Even thinking, I really like my work to be up here. It's just like, how's that going to happen? Just do a little bit of research, ask. Even no one gets back to you, or they go, yeah. It's those things. And asking for help. Always ask for help. It's okay to ask for help.
That's very heartwarming advice. Especially you're okay. I like that. Anyone else with a question?
I just wanted to say thank you so much. And it was amazing to hear all the stories. It kind of makes so much sense of the title of the exhibition now. But to hear all those individual stories. So thank you for your generosity of kind of going right back to the beginning. And I was just sitting here thinking about that connection with each and every kind of project and each person you photographed. Kind of really resonates with that integrity of being true to yourself. So I'm really looking forward to now going and seeing the work, kind of having heard your connection with each of those. And I've seen so much of this work in different publications and different exhibitions. So that was great. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thanks for sitting and listening.
And I love the fact that quite a bit of that work started here. And that's just really heartwarming. And I think some of your projects stretch over quite a long time.
Yeah.
So you maybe photographed one or two things and then went back to it later, or one or two people.
Or they just carry on.
Yeah, when I was thinking of things, I was thinking about the creams and the whitening creams and the hair creams.
That was just over a year.
Was it?
It was like, I think it was like about a year,
Okay.
or a couple of years. But then I documented everything at the Royal College on transparency.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was it.
Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll a little clap again. And thank you so much, Eileen, for being part of this Fast Forward project.
Thanks for having me. I feel very, very lucky.
We feel lucky.
Yeah.
Cool. We can turn off now.